I don't see Commissioner Merrick yet.
Okay, but
Maybe
that gives
we'll
us
give
5.
him a minute or so. It's just 6 o'clock.
But we have 5, so that'll.
Right, we do have a quorum.
Yeah.
Let's see, who is presenting 4th Street tonight? Chris is going to be presenting on 4th Street. And our staff planner for 4th Street tonight is?
This is Jeff Bill. I'm social planner, and I will present the staff report.
Great, thank you, Jeff.
Sorry, are we starting the item right now?
No.
Just we're going to wait one more second and let a couple of people click in because we have to actually establish a quorum and ask for public comment.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to recuse myself from this one because I am within 500 feet.
So before, we haven't quite started yet.
Oh,
so,
sorry.
We will, I think, start soon. It does look like we have a quorum, but we will establish that.
Okay.
Okay.
And I can start the meeting if recording the meeting if you want me to.
Yes, that would be great.
But before I do that, I know there's a number of people joining from the community, and let me do a couple of things too, as I'm reminding myself. I'm turning off the chat, so people will not be able to chat. For the public, while you're not speaking, we ask that you mute yourself and turn off your video so the focus can be with the commissioners. We will give the public a time to provide public comment, either general public comments or at each individual item. And I think that just kind of establishes some ground rules.
Sure. Yeah.
I can start the meeting, or sorry, I can start the recording, and then we can start our quorum or establish our quorum.
All right, yes, go right ahead, Steve, please.
Okay, I just started the recording.
Great. Would you like to take roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Doran?
Yes, here.
Vice Chair Menzinger?
Here.
Commissioner Merrick? I do not see Commissioner Merrick, and he hasn't answered.
Okay.
Commissioner Ahi?
Here.
Commissioner Roche?
Here.
And Commissioner Steinle?
Here.
And sorry, finally, Commissioner Bodner, who is not here. She had emailed us ahead of the meeting and let us know that she was not going to be present. So we do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. And for the planning commissioners, if during the hearings tonight, if you could keep your cameras on, that would be really helpful. And then when we get to the public hearing, I'll have a couple more announcements to make. So I'd like to first ask if any members of the public for tonight's meeting of March the 3rd, 2022, have any public comments for items that are not on the agenda for the night and cannot be acted on. But if there are any general public comments, could you please raise your hand in the reaction function of Ring Central, please? And then our planning director, Steve Golden, will call on you. I'm not seeing any hands raised for any public comments for items not on the agenda. So we'll just move forward with our regularly scheduled meeting tonight. Our first item, oh, sorry.
I do want to let you know, we do have members that are joining by phone. I do see that all of them are muted. And let me just,
yeah, please take care of the housekeeping stuff, Steve, because you have control over a lot of the muting, unmuting.
yeah, so let me just unmute them and make sure nobody has.
Okay.
So we'll ask once again, because the people on the phone don't have the ability to raise their hand or other gestures. But if anybody has a public comment, now's the time. I've unmuted everybody on calling in.
Sure. So if you're on the phone, not on video, if you have a public comment, please speak up and identify yourself.
Okay, I don't think we have any. So let me mute them.
Going once,
And
going twice.
yes.
All right. We will close that section of our agenda. And our first item tonight is a study session. PPR 21-009, Chris Kummerer, if I've not mispronounced your name, apologies. It is for 14 4th Street. It's a preliminary project review for a 4-unit, 2-story townhome development with subterranean parking. No affordable housing is proposed as part of the project. And our project planner from the city is on right now to present.
And I will recuse myself now. So
Thank you, Commissioner
Thank
He's recusing himself.
Thanks.
And just to make it clear, Commissioner Ahi will close his video and not participate, and I will let him know when he can rejoin the meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. Staff report?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Jia Liu, Associate Planner. I'm presenting a study session to obtain Planning Commission preliminary comments regarding this 4-unit multiple family development at 14 4th Street. The application number is PPR 21-0009. We're having this study session today is because of the application is a SB 330 project, and this study session is part of our preliminary project review process in response to SB 330 requirements. The agenda report provided some detailed information regarding the SB 330 process and what the city's role would be. This slide illustrates the 2-step process that SB 330 lays out for jurisdictions to follow. We're now in the first step, which is in the pre-application process. The city did respond to the pre-application and found the pre-application submittal was complete. The next step in the process is for the developer to submit a formal application. The subject site is located in the R3-1 multiple family zoning district with the land use designation of medium density multifamily. The application consists of 4-unit, 2-story multiple residential units with a semi-subterranean parking level on a 7,038 square foot lot. As provided on this slide, as well as in the staff report, the project is substantially compliant with the underlying zoning development standards. This slide provides the neighborhood context map. The subject site is located on 4th Street, bounded by a 2-story duplex to the north, a 3-story multiple family building to the south, a 2-story multi-family building to the east across the 4th Street, and a 3-story multi-family building to the west across the alleyway. The existing site includes a single-story, single-family building with a detached 2-car garage accessing from the alleyway. The slide is showing the current skyline of the immediate neighborhood, viewing from the West Edith Avenue towards the subject site neighborhood. This is the project Cyclone. It shows the site plan at the ground level. Future residents will access the units through the hardscape in the interior side yard facing the West Edith Avenue, as highlighted in yellow on the slide. And vehicle access will be through a one-way driveway entering from 4th Street and exiting to the public alley as highlighted in orange. It will provide a 2-car parking garage for each unit with additional bike parking. One guest parking required by the zoning code will be placed in the rear yard. Trees and landscaping buffer will be provided in the front yard, rear yard, and interior yard. This is the basement level for parking. As presented, each unit will have a 2-car garage with bicycle parking. This is layout of the first floor plan, including a living room, a kitchen, an office room, and a bathroom in each unit. A balcony is also proposed facing south at this level. This is a layout of the second floor plan, includes 2 bedrooms with 2 bathrooms in each unit. Now we're looking at the north elevation, viewing from the building from the interior yard that is abutting the duplex located to the north. The proposed building with an overall height of 31 feet will be a modern architecture with flat roofs that vary in height, resulted from 2 major vertical massing. Horizontal design elements are also presented from the building, including projecting entry porch, railing at the entry stairway, and exposed parking basement that will be painted in gray. Overall, the building materials are composed stucco fiber cement siding with tile accents. This is the east elevation, viewing from the 4th Street. The elevation will have vertical fiber cement siding as the main exterior finish with tile accents. A stucco finish projection will provide some articulation to break the plain wall. To the right, it is the projecting entry porch with the staircase to the entry of the first unit. This is the rear elevation, viewing from the alleyway. And this is the south elevation. It should be mentioned that the garage level is a semi-subterranean basement, that partial of the garage will be under natural ground and partial of the garage will be above ground. In our definition, it is allowed to consider it as a basement, but not a story. This is the rendering going from the 4th Street. And some more renderings to the left of the slide is viewing from the alleyway, and to the right of the slide is viewing from the 4th Street driveway. So currently we're having this Planning Commission study session meeting. In the future, more meetings will be required after the applicant applies for the formal design review permit. However, per SB 330, the city is limited to only 5 public meetings once the formal application is received. We will look for opportunities to condense some meetings, including potential joint planning and complete street commission meeting, in order to preserve the number of meetings that will be necessary for commission consideration or council approval. So with this slide now, staff concludes the presentation and open for questions. Thank you for your listening.
Great. Do any of the commissioners have questions for the staff before we have the applicant speak? Seeing, oh, Richard, you're on mute if you have questions for staff.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Who owns the alley? Is that a city property? Is there's an easement?
It should be the city's. It's a city public alleyway.
Thank you.
I just have one question, and either staff or applicant can answer. What's the clearance between the alley and the overhang area? What's the vertical clearance?
I don't have the number right now in top of my head. I think I can defer this to the applicant.
Sure, thank you. If there are no other questions, I'd like to ask the applicant, Chris, if you'd like to speak to the commission, present.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, if you'd like to put your camera on, it would be great for all of us.
Great, I'm trying to, but it says the host has disabled me, so I'm a black box.
Well, let's.
Oh, there it is. Okay, now I can go. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I'd be happy to start with your question if you like, or I can go ahead with the presentation. What would you?
No, go ahead with your presentation. That'd be great.
Great, thank you. So my name is Chris Coomer of CKA Architects here in Menlo Park up the road. I'm happy to be here tonight with our project team of John, Owen, Payal, and Audrey. Thank you, Geoff, for your presentation and for your guidance in getting us here tonight.
Chris, sorry to interrupt. I just want to let you know you have 10 minutes and I'll have a clock in the background, but we'll let you know when your time's up.
Oh, please, thank you. And
Yeah.
feel free to cut me off if I have a minute or something left. I'm happy to quicken it up. I'd like to focus on sort of three main things. And may I share my screen, Steve?
You should be able to if you click on the share screen, and there you go.
Here we go.
It's coming up. It's shared. Thank you.
So I'd like to focus on three main things tonight. How we think the project reaches an appropriate density for the neighborhood. How we think the project has an appropriate layout for the site, and what turns out to be a difficult site. And then to try to describe how we're trying to create a thoughtful response to the design control items while using traditional materials of clay tile, stucco, and wood in a modern fashion. First, on the density side, this is our project site, as Joe mentioned. We've got 15 units to the south of us here and a much taller building. This is at the maximum height here. Across the street, there are 7 units. Across the alley, there are 23 units. And there's an interesting fourplex here on Edith that we can talk a little bit more about that's very similar sort of in density and size to our project. To the north of us, we've got a duplex on this funny shaped triangular lot. And then across Edith, it's single family residential. So the density of the 4 units, we're hoping is a nice transition from the 15, just simply in numbers, from 15 to 4, and then to the 2 and to 1. So it feels to us like an appropriate density. We're providing the housing that the zoning ordinance supports while sort of stepping down in scale to duplex and then the single family. There also, this is all zoned R31 around here, and you will notice that underground parking is mandated in the ordinance. So I just kind of want to bring that up first. It's not a choice, but that's mandated, and you can see that's why these adjacent parcels also have that. This density is consistent with the general plan and the goals of the city. Let's see, for the lot. Now here's the specific site. A couple of important things. We've got 3 large redwood trees on the Edith side. This is on the triangular parcel. These really screen the project from Edith and create privacy for this parcel, but also sort of privacy from the single family across the way. We've got an interesting little curve on the corner here that is part of the lot that makes it a little bit difficult to work with. And we've got a narrow frontage compared to the depth of the lot. And as was mentioned, there's the alley in the back. The proposal was, we considered the parking quite a bit and how to access the lot in a vehicular fashion, and I'll go through that in a moment. That was quite a challenge, and we hope we've solved that successfully. So our frontage is right here. Here's the corner, and here are these redwood trees again that screen the project nicely from Edith. This is the 120 Edith development here in blue. And this is much older, I think a 70s building, but it takes a similar approach where you drive in from one side, and in this case, you drive in from the alley, I believe, and you exit on 3rd. And it's a 4-unit building as well. So it's a good sort of example of what's been done in the neighborhood, and we're proposing something very similar in typology, although different in look and feel. So here we are again with the trees on Edith, large trees, the duplex, our site, and then the much larger multifamily building. So again, we're stepping down as we get to Edith. Now the parcel is difficult because of being on the corner, and we tried many sort of layouts for the parking. The zoning ordinance mandates that we Don't back out onto anything. You have to pull forward out. So guest parking was solved by parking parallel, and the cars will pull through the site from 4th, exiting on the alley. We didn't want to exit on 4th. You don't want to exit near a corner and potentially be hit by the oncoming traffic, people rounding the corner. So our first pass at the design looks like this. It's a more modern take aesthetically. It also didn't meet the zoning ordinance. We couldn't get the second floor setback to work, and some of the other specifics that were very challenging. So with staff's help, we went back and took another look, and are happy to say that the project is conforming to the ordinance with some effort, and I hope that's an asset for the project. So this is the ensuing design that conforms to the zoning ordinance with our underground parking mandated, no backing out on any of the streets. Our second floor setbacks are working. All right, and so the site plan here shows again driving in and exiting this way onto the alley with our parking on the first level and then 2 levels of living above. This is our partially underground parking. You'll notice that we're 5 feet below the maximum height limit. So when we talk about being a transition from the larger buildings to the smaller buildings, it's not just in words, but that's what the design is doing. Here are the second floor setbacks that are meant to sort of create privacy and from adjoining buildings. So again, after some struggling, we're happy that the design meets the zoning ordinance and we're not asking for variances or exceptions. Now these elevations show, particularly here, this is the Edith side, sort of the effect of the screening trees. So on the Edith side, the units look out predominantly over the triangular parcel and the trees here. The single unit at the back that looks over the duplex actually has its prominent windows facing the alley. And that's shown here to try to maintain some privacy for this duplex unit. And you received a letter from this neighbor today, just kind of some of these concerns I hope we've already addressed in these moves. All right, now the design is trying to use traditional materials that come from the buildings that we love in Los Altos, particularly terracotta that you see in the Spanish style homes that we love in Los Altos, and the warm colored stucco and the natural wood. And so we're trying to use traditional materials in a more modern way. You may be familiar with some of these buildings. This is the Stanford campus, and this is on El Camino as well. So these are examples of that terracotta, that warm palette that is sort of indigenous to Los Altos, and hopefully fits well in the community. Now, our design control, this for an architect is a real challenge. I know the city has put a lot of effort into this. I'd like you all to know that we have tried as applicants to answer every single question in here. So I went through and personally went through each item while designing and making sure that we could answer in the affirmative that we've addressed these. I won't go through them all, but the 25-foot modules, the stacking windows, the percentages of materials on the facades, the angled bays, the stepping parapets, the sills of the windows. Some will have, at 42, some will have opaque glass. We really tried to take this to heart. And with a small lot and a lot of restrictions and the design control, that was quite a challenge. But I want to try to affirm that we're really taking this seriously, and hopefully we can check every single box. And that's what we tried to do here, even down to the want to say this tongue in cheek, but we don't have razor wire or barbed wire on the project, which is listed in the design control. All right, so the ensuing design, again, is this look where we're using a modern design, traditional materials in a modern way. So these, you've seen these views showing how those materials are compiled, again, in a more modern fashion, but trying to use something that's indigenous to the community. You'll see in this lower left, this is the exit on the alley, our parallel parking space, and the large window on the second floor looking to the back. You'll see on the front that we tried to use these residential markers that the design control is asking for, balconies, and the front entry located here. Also materials that are human scale, these tiles and the sort of human scale of the wood. So the last thing I'll mention is I've got, if this shows, this is the benefit of this format. We also have a model here that we can look at. And this, this will show a real world view. If you have questions, I'm happy to kind of tour us around it. This is the entry that is approximately 15 feet in height here, 13 to 15 feet if this is the dimension the commissioner was asking about. And here, oops, here are those trees you can see on Edith modeled and really shading this side of the building and adding privacy and again, kind of blocking the massing. And we're also a good distance from the multifamily building to the left here on 4th. So the privacy concerns are also partly met just by the distance of about 40 feet. So hopefully this gives you a good example of what the building might feel like. And we're pleased to be able to present it to you and hear what you think. So happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I was asking about your front projection, the beige square, and what the clearance was between the driveway and the bottom of that.
Oh, thank you. So this area here,
That element, yeah.
yeah, it's 8 foot. It's a 8'6", I believe, is the driving clearance.
Okay.
Yes, and we have talked about having a steel piece stick out like you would a little bit in a commercial garage, so nobody hits the building.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for your presentation. I'm going to bring it back and close the presentation portion of this. I do have a process question for Planning Director Golden. Do we open this up to public, or do we just bring this back to the commission for study?
Just a slight correction. I'm not the director, but
Excuse me, interim director. Yeah, sorry.
interim planning services
Interim
manager.
Planning Services director.
It's a long,
Gave you a promotion.
long title. But at any rate, what I would recommend doing is open up for public comment and then concluding it with your discussion.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm a neophyte at this, my first meeting. So I'd like to open this up for public comment. And if you are speaking, if you'd like to speak from the public again, if you would raise your hand in that function, the reaction function at the bottom, if you are on the phone, if you will unmute yourself and let Mr. Golden know that you are waiting.
So again, if you can find the gesture button, raise your hand, any sort of gesture will allot. It looks like we just have one so far. So Chair, we usually allot 3 minutes.
3 minutes, yes, thank you.
So I have one speaker, Roberta. You can unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Yes, hi, this is Roberta. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, I really do watch really carefully, and
Roberta,
I really just this. Excuse me?
we lost you for a minute there. Could you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I was just going to say, I think the architect and developer is doing a good job. I think he's, taking a very challenging piece of property and doing the appropriate size with the appropriate landscape. And I think it was very thoughtful. So I just wanted to give a thumbs up. And that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Steve, do you see anybody else waiting to comment? I don't see any other
I
hands.
don't. Let me just unmute, and I'm going to do this one at a time. I have unmuted all the people on that have called in on the phone. If any of those phone callers, if you have any public comment, you can speak up now.
Let's see.
I'm not hearing anybody, so
Not
I'll
hearing
mute them
anybody.
again. Yeah, I'll mute
Okay.
them again.
Great, you're muted. Well, then I'll close the public comment section of this and bring it back to the Planning Commission for comments or questions to the applicant. Let's see, I can start on my left, which is Commissioner Steinle.
Okay, thank you. Let me say, Chris, I think I like this building. I will be even a little bit more enthusiastic than Roberta was. We see a lot of challenging buildings. I don't think it's possible to build anywhere in Los Altos that isn't challenging these days. And we see a lot of buildings with narrow fronts that are very fussy, and I think that you've done a very elegant job here of using color and different textures to take advantage of what you've got to work with. And I really do like the building. Having said that, I'm wondering, looking at the I guess Shelley described it as the picture frame, the lighter piece on the front of the building. Yeah. I'm wondering if that could maybe be lightened up a little bit, in the sense that it could be made a little bit less heavy. It's I mean, this is, if you take my aesthetic sense in a dollar bill, you'll get 4 quarters and change. So, I'm just throwing this out as my reaction. It strikes me, I understand exactly what you're doing, and I'm all in favor of it, but I'm wondering if that could be lightened up a little bit, just in terms of its size. I take it that that's the same cream stucco that you're using every place else where it's a lighter color. Is that correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Right. So you basically have 2 colors, light and dark, different darks, but it's either light or dark as you're going around. Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, the intention is to also highlight the terracotta, right?
Right.
That's
On the front. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got wooden things around on the side, depending on where it is, and I like more wood, the better in my view. So I like the fact that you're doing that. And it will weather nicely behind the trees and all that sort of thing. So I think that's a good thing. So thumbs up as far as I can see. I think that this is a very good start. I look forward to seeing this again when it comes to us. So I think I would encourage you to get it ready and go.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Steinle. How about Commissioner Menzinger? Susan, there you go.
Yeah, I just unmuted. Yeah, I just also want to compliment you on what I think is a very nice infill project. It obviously is a challenging lot, and I think you've done a very nice job of making it work. A couple of questions, just trying to be responsive to some of the comments from the neighbors, and I appreciate you adjusting the window. I think it was the one facing the 110 West Edith. Just curious if there's anything from a landscaping perspective or anything else you're planning on doing, or if you have the room to do that on this lot to make it even a little bit more of a barrier for them.
Thank you. Yeah, on the side, on that side facing Edith and facing the duplex, that is our access. So a walkway to the units. And so we've only got, like a foot of planting between there and the fence. And so it's pretty limited. We can, that's a good suggestion. I think we should try to do as much as we can in that spot. And then, the preponderance of that facade looks out over the redwood trees. I guess that's just the good fortune of the lot. And so there is already some built-in privacy. We just need to do all we can to adjust the windows and hopefully, be respectful.
Sure.
So if you could just do what you can there, but I understand the limitations of the lot. And it appears the driveway entrance, there's also no really space for any kind of landscaping on that as well.
No, that's right. I mean, we're proposing 2 trees on each facade. So 2 new trees on the
I see that.
facades. And those are, the design control actually specifies sort of where you do those and where, you've got blank spots and whatnot. So we're trying to sort of do that. But that side doesn't offer that opportunity as much.
Other than that, I think it's a nice solution to a difficult lot. So
Great, thank you. Commissioner Roche?
Thank you. I'm really impressed. I looked at an earlier rendition of your building, and then I saw the new iteration with the picture frame in the front. Like everybody else, I was very impressed. You did a nice job. Very difficult lot, and I can tell from everything you did and what you said, you went to put a lot of thought into it. We're concerned about the large building, the units next door, and then the duplex on the adjacent side, and how you fit it in. I think maybe I've got one question, but before I get to that, and a comment. I personally think it's a little dark, but colors in the eye of the beholder, and what I think is too dark might be too light for a lot of people. I just think it was the color, the dark brownish terracotta-ish color would maybe be a little softened, a little more softened, if that's such a word, a little softener. It might have, for me, more appeal. I was initially concerned about what are you gonna do with the driveway, and I'm glad to hear that you've got it set up as one way. One question I have is how do you get from the garage into the units? I didn't see any direct stairs from each garage into the first floor. Is there a door at the back of the garage that go up a set of steps so they come in the front door? How do you get from the garage directly into that unit?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so the garage doors, the garages themselves are contained. So you close your garage door and you walk out onto the driveway. And then there are steps out the alley side that get you to grade. And then you walk around to the entries of the units. So there isn't an individual stairway from each garage out. It's everybody would walk out to the alley side, up some steps, and then around into the units.
Okay. Not real ideal. In the rain, you're carrying your groceries, or you're gonna come to the grocery store and you got to go out in the rain like today and then walk around and up the stairs and so forth. I think that's about the only thing I could see that I thought was negative, but I think you did a darn good job. I commend you I took a careful look because of the redwood trees on Edith and your limitations and the condos next door and the balconies that face the alleys, the driveway side of the subject. It's good. The alleyway in the back with the condos that face the alleyway, that's set back far enough, so their balconies I don't think are going to have a direct impact. And then they're going to look at the rear of your building looks pretty nice. Well, I've got no complaints on it. I think it's a go.
Thank you, Commissioner Roche. I see Commissioner Merrick has joined us. Great to see you. Would you like to comment on this project?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry I was late, by the way.
No worries.
I'm glad to hear people, both even in the public comments and on the panel, like it, because I also liked it. I thought it was a very aesthetic. I liked the look of it. And in addition, I thought it looked like it will fit in nicely in that part of town. So I echo everyone's positive comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Going last, I appreciate your design. Thank you. I also appreciate the fact that you did a comparative analysis of our standards and what you're building met in those standards. So, there wasn't a question about that. So thank you. I think that really helps us a lot. And it helps the public too understand how you've met those standards. So thank you for your thoughtful design. And if I don't hear any other comments from our commissioners, I would
Ellie, can I add one quick thing?
absolutely.
Right. Chris, whatever provisions you made for bicycles, double it. Okay. That's an advice for going to the Complete Streets Commission. You will never have enough bicycle racks or things, so double it. And they will like to see EV chargers. So I don't know how far you are along in that process, but that's a word to the wise.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. And just to my earlier comment, Chris, about the 8'6" clearance on that architectural element, I'd probably take another look at that. I just fear, you get a Range Rover or a Land Rover Discovery with the roof rack and it takes that corner right off. So
Thank you. Yeah, we've been looking at is actually having a metal post stick out that lists the height. And I think the standard car can make it underneath. It's really if you've got like the Amazon van drives in or something, and that's what we worry. And
that's a real possibility. Yeah, right there. They will want to cut through the parking. Sure.
Well, they might use the alley. The alley might become the delivery area and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that could.
Because I take it there'll be no parking back there. I don't know, John. Is it marked no parking at this point, or well, do we know what we do about that? I'm a little concerned because of what Richard brought up about the way you go out of the garages and come around and the stairs are in the back there by the alley. I'd be concerned about the alleys becoming a de facto entrance to the property, for visitors and whatever, and then people might park in the alley, which we wouldn't want because it's not that wide, right? So.
Yeah, with regards to the parking with Commissioner Steinle, it would not support like parallel parking or otherwise. It's just too narrow for that. So it is I believe those alleys are supposed to be 2A alleys. And they are very, they're very tight. So
yeah. I mean, I would be concerned about that aspect because I could see the Amazon trucks pulling in back there, and I could see somebody dropping somebody off or Uber or whatever. So that's I mean, there's nothing anybody can do about that, but that's just something that's going to happen. So
sure.
The guest space that's on the alley that's parallel, interestingly, would provide some respite. So if somebody did park and drop something off and that guest space is open, which it should be most of the time, then that could occur in that space.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Well, thank you for your presentation and thank you for your comments. At this point, our public hearing for the regularly scheduled meeting doesn't start until 7 o'clock. And interim planning service director, Golden.
Manager.
Turn right now till 7 o'clock.
Yeah, since that's what we posted on the agenda, we can adjourn to 7 o'clock. If everybody, or I should say the commissioners want to maybe rejoin at 6:55 or something, just make sure we're all joined in.
Sure. So for the public who is on waiting for our regular scheduled meeting, we will re-adjourn at 7 o'clock. So please come back and join us.
I'll share a screen with some sort of notice.
Okay, thank you very much. And
we're going to keep this live.
Yeah, so the link is going to be the same link for the regular meeting. Didn't expect to actually end this early, but that's fine. So we'll just use the same link. If you want to just turn your video off and mute, that's fine. See you all at 6:55 or 7 o'clock.
Thank you all for the comments.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Let me see if, good evening. It's 7 o'clock and we had recessed from our study session for the March 3rd Planning Commission meeting. Took a brief recess after our study session and now we are returning for our regular meeting and our public hearing. Interim Planning Service Director, do we retake our roll call or should we retake our roll call?
No, you don't need to. We're just
Okay.
reconvening from the break.
Okay, great. We're reconvening this meeting on March 3rd for a public hearing. A couple of items I'd like to bring up before we start this first public hearing. It looks like we have several participants tonight in this meeting. So a couple of things, since we have so many maybe potential speakers, if we have more than 10 or so speakers, we're going to limit the time that you can speak to 2 minutes. If you cede your time, you have to cede your whole time to someone else. You can't speak for a minute and cede the other minute, but in no event will a speaker have more than 10 minutes to speak on the item. So I just like to clear that up. And if you wouldn't mind when you're not speaking, please keep your cameras off except for the planning commissioners and our city staff and our outside council support staff to keep your cameras on, but it's better for the bandwidth and for people to hear if you keep your cameras off. Let's see, and our planning staff is going to disable the chat function. So when it comes to time to open for public comment, you will raise your hand on the reactions buttons at the bottom of your screen, and then Steve Golden will then be able to call on you. And if you're on the phone, he'll unmute you and call on you, so you'll have your opportunity to speak. Let me see. I don't think I've missed any what I call housekeeping items. So therefore, I'd like to open the regular meeting and announce the first public hearing. Jolie, please, if I've left something out, please do speak up.
Yes, we need to, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I had a little problem with it before. We will, at the end of public, we're going to be taking all of the public comment.
Sure.
Take notes. And then at the end of public comment, we may take a recess, and the team that's here tonight, we will respond to the certain comments and questions that the public may have. So if you're out in the public, we will be responding to your questions and your comments, but we're going to be doing those all at the end of the public comment period.
Great, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Great. Well, our first item tonight, thank you, is the Wireless Communication Ordinance Amendment. I guess I'll read the whole thing. The revisions to the City of Los Altos's existing standards for the development of wireless telecommunications facilities, including an ordinance to regulate permissible locations and preferences for the location of wireless facilities. These locational standards, which would replace the locational standards now provided in the City of Los Altos Resolution 2019-35, would be adopted by ordinance into Chapter 14.82 of the Los Altos Municipal Code. In addition, the city proposes to expand and supplement the existing developmental standards and design guidelines and preferences for wireless telecommunications contained in the aforementioned Resolution 2019-35 by, number one, adding a set of basic design principles that would apply to all wireless telecommunications facilities, and number two, identifying configuration preferences along with design guidelines for specific types of wireless facilities. And with that, I will call on staff to please introduce the item and the staff report for us.
Yes, I'll start. My name is Lloyd Zola. I'm a consultant to the city. I'm with the firm of Metis Environmental Group. And along with Mike Afflerbach and outside counsel, as well as your city attorney, Jolie Houston, we actually prepared the alternative standards before you, the ordinance and design guidelines. And if I could, I'll share my screen and walk you through what is being proposed this evening. Okay, why? It's not on it.
Just as a note, I let the commissioners know that after the presentation by the staff, then it will be time for commission to have questions before we go to the public.
Okay, great. You should have the our title slide. Does everybody have that now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. The purpose of the ordinance and the design guidelines in front of the city this evening are to deal with a couple different objectives in looking at your current regulations and design standards. One is to make sure that there is provision for adequate coverage and being able to accommodate advanced technology. And as I'll explain in a minute, there are some very significant, substantial changes occurring in the technology that are necessitating changes in standards. But the other side of this is to minimize the impacts and visual intrusiveness of wireless facilities. So we have two very different objectives, both of which we are trying to meet. The third objective is to customize the standards to Los Altos and your community's land use arrangement, the juxtaposition of where your commercial areas are, where your residential areas are, your main streets, and so on. So that is the purpose of what's behind the revised standards and guidelines in front of you today. The one limitation that is important to remember as we proceed through the evening is that the city cannot regulate the placement, construction, modification of wireless facilities that meet FCC regulations on the basis of environmental effects related to radio frequency emissions. So as much as that is a public concern, and I'll use the phrase RF emissions for radio frequency emissions, but as much as that is a public concern, the city cannot regulate based on those concerns as long as a facility meets FCC standards. So that is kind of an envelope outside of which we cannot go with ordinance and guidelines. I had mentioned change in wireless technologies, and we all remember the big macro facilities, the tower with lots of antennas on them. Those things go 100, 200 feet high, and that was the technology. Those were very powerful facilities, and because of their power, they could transmit over long distances, and so the technology did not require a lot of them. Though the technology is moving away from those facilities and moving toward what are called small wireless facilities that are defined in ordinance, or defined in law, no greater than 50 feet and a number of other standards. They are far less visually intrusive. They are a lot smaller, but they're also much less powerful. They repurpose and reuse existing frequencies. And what that means, this technology that is becoming the predominantly, or is the predominant technology, is because they have to be spaced closer to each other, any community needs more of these facilities. And the picture you see on the left is an example of a facility. I can't remember what community it's in. It's a standard light pole. And what you see protruding, or what you see above the yard arm, is actually the wireless facility. Now I'll talk about locational standards. And the map you see here is the city zoning ordinance, and you can see the very large percentage of your city is now in residential zones, basically the yellows and browns. So what is being proposed are a change from the existing locational standards. The resolution 2019-35 excludes all residential zones. Wireless facilities cannot go in residential zones. It establishes a 500-foot buffer for facilities from schools, as well as a 1,500-foot buffer between small facilities. And what is being proposed is to continue excluding residential zones for building and roof-mounted facilities, but permitting small wireless facilities within rights of way for expressways, arterials, collectors, and minor collectors, your city's major streets, the Foothill Expressway, El Camino Real, San Antonio, as well as local commercial streets. So the expressways, arterials, collectors, minor collectors, the proposal would be regardless of the adjacent zoning. Facilities, small facilities could be put there, commercial streets as they are now. And then we had also added a provision because one of the things that became a concern was the potential for having facilities along, for example, San Antonio every 1,000 feet. So the provision, the proposed standards allow for locating along local residential streets that are immediately adjacent to the expressways, arterials, the major streets. And then also the proposal is to replace the existing provision in your standards that allows for exceptions to locational standards. So under current standards, a carrier could apply for an exception to your standards if they could demonstrate that the only way coverage could be met is with whatever site they were proposing. We are proposing eliminating those exceptions and saying if you come down to, if a carrier would come down to needing what is now needing an exception, they would require, we would ask for a system-wide analysis rather than just looking at facilities one by one, and then proposing a 1,000-foot buffer rather than a 1,500-foot buffer. Now, the standards can be perceived in preferences, and this is the way ordinances are moving. They're moving away from saying they are permitted here and prohibited there to identifying preferred and less preferred areas and then potentially other areas. So the preferred areas in the proposed ordinance are the non-residential areas. And what the ordinance says, proposed ordinance says is we, the community, we, the city of Los Altos, prefer that your new facilities be in non-residential areas. Less preferred are the expressways, arterials, collectors, local collectors within that are maybe adjacent to residential zoning, but we will permit those only if you demonstrate, a carrier could demonstrate that they could not provide adequate coverage in the absence of one of these streets adjacent to a residential zone. And then, as I mentioned, replacing the exceptions that are basically a site-by-site review. We would say, carrier, you don't get to just come up with an exception and show us this facility is needed without opening up and showing us your entire system, how that works, and first demonstrating you can't move existing facilities around and build facilities in permitted and preferred and less preferred locations. So what's now an exception for one site would be, let us see your entire system and we'll deal with it that way. This is a map showing where facilities are permitted today. And there are preferences within these, but these are all of the commercial zones. The colored areas identify essentially the city's commercial zones where the facilities, where wireless facilities are permitted. And you will see small circles and triangles with aqua addresses. And those show where the triangles are existing small wireless facilities. For example, the small wireless facility up on Distal Drive near El Camino Real. and where there are macro facilities, those big tower, the bigger facilities, for example, the one at 1840 Grant Road. So this is the existing ordinance and its locational criteria, along with where facilities are. I had mentioned adding the Arterials expressway, the Foothill Expressway, the right-of-way for that, Arterials, for example, El Camino Real in San Antonio, collector roadways such as Almond, and local collectors such as, I think that's Covington. But these would be what would be added along with the residential streets adjacent to those. And so what is being proposed would look like this. And purposefully, the streets pop out so you can see what is being proposed. And these are solid lines. The purple being, when I mentioned, those local residential streets adjacent to, for example, Almond. So rather than potentially having a facility every 1,000 feet on Almond, one could be moved around a corner onto one of the streets, onto a local street, so you don't see them all along Almond. And these are solid lines. Remember, also proposed in the ordinance are 1,000-foot separation. So what that means is if you could picture the driveway into City Hall from San Antonio. So if a small facility were placed in the right-of-way for San Antonio, right immediately north of the driveway into City Hall, 1,000 feet takes you all the way up to the intersection of Almond where the fire station is. So City Hall driveway to Almond is 1,000 feet. So that would drop out as a site where a second facility could be placed. And now I'll talk about design guidelines. So those are the locational standards. The other thing we've done are propose some revisions to the design guidelines. One of them is to add an explicit set of design principles that will apply to all wireless facilities. And I'll explain what those are in a second. The other thing, we've also modified some of the configuration preferences, and then the guidelines in front of you also, the existing guidelines are supplemented. We've added some illustrations, and they're far more detailed than the guidelines adopted in your current resolution. First, I want to talk about the design principles. The purpose of the design principles is to provide an explanation for what is it we're trying to accomplish with the design guidelines. This would be the city's statement to the public, the city's statement to the carriers if they are approved. Why are we doing these guidelines? What is it we're trying to accomplish? First is the three basic principles. One is minimize impacts. We're trying to minimize the visual impacts of these facilities to make them as least visible as possible. We're trying to deal with the noise impacts of them. And we have clearly said in the design guidelines that the city's existing noise standards apply to these facilities and they may not exceed city noise standards. And then there are other standards dealing with minimizing impacts such as safety, not impacting or impairing use of the right-of-way, drive aisles, drivable streets, and so on. So traffic safety is one, and safety for bicyclists and pedestrians walking along and biking along streets. The second is to clearly say integration and concealment. We want facilities that are visually integrated in their sites and as hidden from view as they can feasibly be made. And the other thing is that we want, that the guidelines talk about that an unconcealed design, so hanging the equipment on the side of a pole rather than concealing it inside a pole, is only permitted if the less preferred design configurations or only if a more preferred, less visible design is infeasible. So we don't just go from a, here's our preferences and then get an application for less desirable, less preferred, more visible configuration without a demonstration that that is what a carrier must do. They cannot provide feasibly a less visually intrusive design. And finally, the last principle is context. Very simply, what works on one site may not work on another site. And while we may have a guideline that says hiding a building mounted facility behind a parapet on the roof is a good thing, if that screen wall makes that building look better, bigger, more bulky, that's not a good thing. And so we've said that one design guideline does not fit all, and the context of a site is important when reviewing a facility. These are the existing preferences for configuration of a facility. This is what is adopted today, co-location being the most desirable, and then a new telecommunications tower being the least desirable, least preferred. What we are proposing, or what is being proposed, is to look at building mounted facilities and identifying what would be preferred if it's mounted on a building versus what is less preferred. So antennas that are concealed within a facade, architectural elements that you don't know are antennas, rooftop concealment, those are all the kinds of things that would be preferred, and facade mounted antennas, trees, and so on, the faux trees and pole mounted facilities would be less desirable. And the picture you see here, those little dark things protruding from the building just under the roof line, those are actually wireless antennas. So they can be made to be pretty visually unintrusive and look like they're part of the building, which is what the guidelines say in terms of building mounted. Now, when we look at facilities that are within the rights of way, this is one of the issues, and this is what you're seeing being proposed now. What we are saying, or what the proposed guidelines say, is that use of light poles where everything is within the pole is the preferred, or underground is the preferred standard. And that was that picture we had shown earlier. That is preferred. There are less preferred options. Use of existing or replacement poles. And as we know, that is popular because there are so many around the city. And there are proposals to use the PG&E poles, either existing or replacement, standalone poles where there are no existing utility, or light poles where things are not completely underground or within the pole. The ordinance or the guidelines also state that if a carrier proposes a less preferred alternative, they must substantiate why that less preferred configuration, why the less preferred design is being proposed, and why they cannot propose a completely concealed pole that would be used as a wireless facility. We've also expanded in the proposed guidelines the existing cities' existing design guidelines to be clear that facilities need to be consistent with adjacent landscape design, guidelines to retain existing mature trees wherever feasible, to design and construct underground vaults in locations that they're not going to impact the roots of existing street trees. And then where landscaping is proposed to screen or soften the appearance of a facility, that landscaping also needs to be retained for the lifetime of the wireless facility. And then guidelines to provide passive louvers and ventilation as preferred compared to mechanical ventilation. And the guidelines, just adding detail throughout the guidelines. The actions that the commission are being asked to take tonight, or being asked to take, are to recommend that the city approve 2 resolutions and an ordinance. one resolution approving a negative declaration for the guidelines and the ordinance. And there was an initial study prepared and a negative declaration that was distributed for public review. And the comments basically are regarding the wireless facilities themselves rather than the environmental effects of those, affecting whether a neg deck would be appropriate or not. Also, in front of you is a recommendation to ask council to approve the ordinance and the design guidelines, the resolution. And what I wanted to point out before closing are the comments that we received, that the city has received. There are comments from the public, comments from the carriers, Verizon, and from the public, pretty consistently that facilities within residential zones should be avoided, a preference to keep all wireless facilities within commercial areas, and then issues regarding safety concerns. So as you consider the locational standards this evening, consider the existing or the expansion to the existing requirements, expanding into the major streets, the expressways and so on, adjacent to residential zones, the less preferred alternatives, and the replacement for the exception process in the current. That addresses, depending on your recommendation, those concerns from the public. Safety concerns were also raised by the public, as I mentioned, safety concerns and health concerns related to the radio frequency emissions. You are enjoined, you are prohibited and preempted from regulating based on that. But there are also standards related to safety, related to potential for fire, the materials that are in these facilities, and so on. And we do note in response to, in the comments and in your package that was delivered today, that all of these facilities, the small wireless facilities, are subject to Public Utilities Commission General Order 95, which addresses safety concerns in relation to utility poles. They are subject to building code, subject to fire code, subject to electrical code, and so on. So the safety standards regarding fire, explosion, and so on are already in place. The carriers, Verizon, have raised preemption issue. You will see there is a letter in your packet that was posted on the city's website from attorney for the carrier for Verizon, raising a large variety of preemption issues. And we have looked at those, and for some issues that they raised, provided you with alternative wording. So what was delivered is an annotated ordinance and annotated guidelines that summarize all of the comments, the comments from the public, from the carriers related to specific provisions, and then provide, in some cases, alternative text for your consideration tonight. So again, the actions in front of you would be recommend that city council approve the resolution for the negative declaration, the ordinance for locational standards, and the resolution for wireless, the design guidelines. So with that, unless the attorneys have any other comments, I would be glad to take any questions.
Great, thank you. I'd like to ask this time, first of all, if the attorneys have any comments to make along with Mr. Zola, and if not, then it's time that the planning commissioners would have their availability to ask questions of Mr. Zola before we go to public comment. Any comments from the attorneys who have been working with our city attorney on the presentation? I guess I see none. I'd like to open it up for our planning commissioners to ask questions of Mr. Zola. I guess I will start it. I see to my right, Commissioner Roche. If you'd like to start.
Good evening. Yes, thank you very much. Question, does the city of Los Altos noise standards, do they meet all state and federal guidelines requirements?
There are, yeah, I'll answer it this way. The state guideline, there are no state guidelines regarding what you are required to do. Your standards are common throughout the state. They're from the standpoint of technically they are a good standard. Because one of the issues that it needs to be dealt with that your ordinance, as I remember, does is deal with time of day when noise is created. The same loudness at night is much more pervasive than it is during the day. And so we believe those standards are meet the state guidelines for what is generally acceptable and generally unacceptable throughout the state.
Have they been challenged at any time? I just want to make sure that we proceed with this, that we don't get ourselves into a bind that, well, this wasn't done or this doesn't meet the requirements, particularly with the decibel rating and so forth. And again, these cell towers are, above the height of the roof, at the top of the poles. And I've been by all the ones that we have noted in the city, and so you can't hear anything. But I just want to make sure with the new materials that are out there and the new cell towers that we're not going to find ourselves in a problem.
Right, yeah, there will be mechanical cooling on some of them, which is less preferred. But I have worked with noise ordinances throughout the state, and I believe, I'm a planner, an environmental planner, not an attorney, but I believe your standards are appropriate standards. And even the comment from the carriers that we had regarding noise were regarding a standard that was far more stringent than your city noise ordinance. There was no comment from the carriers regarding those noise ordinance. And I think it is totally appropriate that you've adopted a noise ordinance that is pretty standard around the state, and for you to tell the carriers that you will meet the same standard that every other noise source in this city is required to meet. And for the public, we can also say that given these standards, using the city noise ordinance, that the mechanical cooling of a facility would be no louder and can be no louder than the same standard that your neighbor would be permitted to have their mechanical equipment on their site. It's the same standard applying to both.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Menzinger, any questions for?
Yeah, I realize every community is different and will address some of these issues differently, but in general, what is being proposed here? Has it been withstood, challenged by the carriers and courts?
I will leave that to the attorneys about legal challenges. Every city is different, and from my standpoint and my view as an environmental planner, I believe what we have here is an appropriate balance between coverage and minimizing impacts, particularly visual impacts. This ordinance and the guidelines were not crafted in any way that they regulate or would regulate placement design regarding radio frequency emissions. And so from that, I'd ask either Jolie or Deborah Fox, the attorneys who've been involved with this, to supply any answers regarding challenges.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Messenger. Deborah Fox of the firm of Myers Nave, and we have been working with Mr. Zola and the team on the proposals that are put forth to you. The issue at play here, as you know, is a very broad-based wireless locational ordinance that applies across the city, and as Mr. Zola noted, was tailored to meet the specific land use dictates of Los Altos. every community is different, and it is important that when you design an ordinance of this nature, that you are responsive to the community and the zoning designations within your community. The main challenges that carriers have been making have related to the buffer requirements and to regulations that they believe are improperly based on the RF issues as to health, either directly or indirectly. This area of the law is evolving, and that is because the Federal Telecom Act is pretty young. So you cannot take off the shelf and simply apply off the shelf a ordinance that has been validated by a federal court and apply it to your community. But the general legal principles that we know that are at play from the case law that we do have been reviewed and accordingly evaluated in the drafting of the provisions that we offer to you here tonight.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Oh, can I go?
Sorry, Commissioner Ahis. Apologies. Yeah.
I had a couple. The first one was the zones that you have listed in the packet. I know that they're not residential now, but I believe some of them are eventually going to have residential based on our housing element that's coming out. I was just curious if there's something in the document that kind of prepares for the possibility if it becomes predominantly residential for some of those zones. Do we have something in there?
No, and I know statewide now that strict separation of what is a commercial zone versus what is a residential zone, that is changing because of the housing crisis. But I would say this, that the zones that a city maintains that are commercially zoned, one, every city can define what is a commercial zone versus what is a residential zone. So there is that. The zones that you have that are now commercial zones that would allow some degree of residential, you could by definition in your zoning ordinance decide what is the predominant character of those zones. And so as long as you maintain, and I'll just kind of summarize, C zones versus R zones. So a C zone, commercial zone that may allow residential, if the intent is for it to be, and this is a generic, not just Los Altos. So every city is struggling with the same thing. C zones that are commercial may allow some residential, but C commercial would be predominantly commercial with some residential. What is the predominant character? If you're looking at going to mixed use zones that could be either commercial or residential in overall character, then as a community, you would define for purposes of ordinances that say commercial zone versus residential zone, which is it? How do we treat mixed use zones in that context? So this is all part of the customizing the ordinance to your community. And as your zoning provisions change over time, you can change these definitions to keep up with your change definitions of the zones themselves.
Okay, so that
if I might add to that, I would also note though that at page 8 of the proposed ordinance, we do define the particular zoning designations of residential zones. So if you have an area that is moving into a residential zoning designation and it now carries the designation of multifamily district R3.18, then that would be covered by the proposed ordinance. So
okay.
I do think that in a sense, I probably would differ with Mr. Zola in his original answer to the question. I would say, yes, we have addressed that, or we have a provision for addressing that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, we have the provision for it. Yeah, exactly. And that's the change that can occur over time. the provision is there to deal with changes in your ordinance, changes in the character of your zones over time.
Yeah, because just for instance, the office administrative zone is not a commercial or a residential, but that's a zone that is specifically being looked at for potential housing. So that, but you're saying that if the classification becomes residential, then we're clear because of what's on page 8 of what you just said.
Right. And if those
Yeah.
classifications on page 8 need to be changed because of changes you're making to your ordinance and the definitions of zones, then you do that concurrent with the change to your zone itself.
Got it. Okay. And then the only other question I had was the distances that you have: 200 feet for Foothill Expressway, 500 for San Antonio, 300. What type of logic was given for those numbers? Is there a reason that they couldn't all be the same, or I'm assuming it's based on traffic?
It's based on traffic and some other considerations. When that was first suggested, we first looked at it, we looked at a blanket 500 feet. But when you look, for example, at the Foothill Expressway, there are, in a number of cases, frontage roads along that expressway. And there are areas between a local residential street and the expressway right-of-way. So you don't really need to get into the residential neighborhood to the same degree. As we're up along El Camino Real, why move south into the residential neighborhoods? Because the commercial buildings that extend a couple hundred feet south would be preferred over getting even farther south of that into the residential areas. So those are pieces of the logic that we looked at with getting those, trying to reduce down that 500 feet and trying to recognize the intrusiveness of these facilities in residential neighborhoods, particularly where there are existing PG&E overhead wires right now. Because wood pole, you cannot put the wiring and the equipment inside a wood pole. So you're kind of stuck with equipment on the outside. So we really tried to limit in these ordinance and those distances, the visual intrusiveness of these into the neighborhoods.
Okay. And then finally, just in terms of the tiers, because you have obviously the first tier, which is non-residential, and then the less preferred, and then finally, worst case with the residential streets. I'm wondering if some type of thing has been overlaid with the map that you have to see if basically, like, how realistic is it that we would get to that third kind of tier where we have to kind of implement that system?
Yeah, those are discussions that we've had with the RF expert, Mike Offerbach, that we've worked with in putting together the ordinance. It is, and there's attorneys staring at me right now, I would say very unlikely we would get to that, into that third tier. The ordinance has been crafted so you should not get to that third tier, but we can't guarantee with the movement of technology, any particular carrier's existing set of facilities that you would never need to, especially with change of technology.
Yeah.
But we believe that you getting into that third tier should not be necessary.
Okay, got it.
Great.
That was all I had. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I have Commissioner Merrick up.
I have no questions at this time.
Great, thank you. And then Commissioner Steinle.
Yeah, I have just a couple. It's a complicated system. Do we have any idea? I don't know exactly who can answer this question, and maybe it's a little premature, but how does this actually get administered by the city? In other words, a carrier wants to do something. Who are they going to go to? They're going to go to somebody on staff, I assume, but it isn't going to be community development. Maybe, I don't know. Jolie, maybe you're the person to handle this question. Have we gotten to that point, or am I premature?
No, it's going to be, my internet's been a little unstable today. It will definitely be staff, and the permits have been, they go through Public Works. but since this is moved into the zoning, it is going to be administered through planning, as we understand it right now, planning with assistance with public works for the encroachment permits. And the way it's, so that's how it's going to be implemented. Before it was public works, and then it went to the city manager, and the city manager could approve or deny the permits under the existing ordinance. And then I can defer to Mr. Zola, but that's how we're seeing it right now. So
I guess part of the question was what kind of expert, is it going to require particular expertise other than the normal expertise of the folks we have on staff, or is this just, you can do this if it fits and we'll go ahead and say yes? I mean, who's got discretion to say, wait a second, and where does it go if there's a problem? Does it come to the council? Does it come to planning? I mean, you know, are we going to have to deal with this the way the Supreme Court used to deal with railroad rates? I mean, is that, you know?
No.
I think maybe I can jump in and take this one.
Yeah, Deborah, great, yes.
So first off, we have not changed the process as far as who makes the determination and if it can be appealed. So the initial determination is made by the city manager, and then any appeal would go to the city council. As far as your practical questions about the application process, if indeed this new proposed ordinance is adopted, we will be working with your city attorney, and we will update the current application for wireless facilities to make sure that it's in keeping with the new ordinance. And then we will work with staff to decide upon the appropriate way to move it through the planning department, get comments as well from public works. Your question, though, I think kind of hit on some issues that may come up if indeed an applicant moves to the third tier, because in the third tier, there needs to be a more extensive analysis. And we have put in certain provisions in the code that when those more extensive reviews are required, that the city can retain an RF expert to look at the claim of need to go to this third tier level, and that those charges can be borne by the applicant. So I think that we have tried to address what we anticipate moving forward as applications may come forward.
Okay, thank you. That helped. I have one last question. I guess this is for Lloyd. If I understood your answer to Maris's question about getting to the third tier, basically what you're proposing, and if this is incorrect, please correct me. Basically what you're proposing is the system we have now, sort of, with the possibility of moving to a more expanded version of it on some demonstration of need. Is that a fair way of putting it, or is that?
I think I would explain it a little bit different.
Yeah.
If you came down under the current ordinance, if you came down to a situation where a carrier needed a site that was not otherwise permitted, they would identify a site and do an analysis over some radius that says there is no site available within X feet of where we're proposing, therefore we want our exception. And the possibility under the current ordinance is doing that one by one, exception by exception over a limited radius, I think several hundred feet or so. The idea of that system is moving that to one, saying there are less preferred alternatives, and our fallback position is, no, we aren't going to look at a single site. You're going to show us your entire system, and then we will, along with you, look at how your system works. Can you move existing facilities around within what is permitted, whether it's preferred or less preferred? Can you add facilities? Can you avoid getting into those facilities, getting into locations that are on the local residential streets where we really would prefer they not be? So it's really moving from a site-by-site system to a identifying some as less preferred, and then the balance are, no, we look at the system rather than a site at a time.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I have one more, and maybe this, Jolie, this is a question for you. Well, you may know, who knows the answer. If I remember correctly from when the urgency ordinance was put up, there was some discussion of, like along El Camino Real, it's really a Caltrans issue as to whether the things are put in. It's not necessarily Los Altos is going to have that, determine that. Do I remember accurately, and was that accurately stated, or do we know yet? And I'm thinking also about Foothill, which I believe is actually owned by the county. Do we have control over those spaces, or are they just going to be done irrespective of what we might wish to do?
I have to say that I wasn't around when that other ordinance was adopted.
I know. I didn't mean to blindside you, but I mean that was something that was raised at the time. And for those, I actually live on El Camino Real, so I'm kind of expecting, the Caltrans is just going to run my life.
Yeah, you would go through if it's a Caltrain right away, or a county right away. That's where they would get their encroachment permits, and I think Deborah or Lloyd could add to that, but we don't control those right of ways.
Yeah, I mean, and we've been talking about those as though they were part of Los Altos. We like to think of them as part of Los Altos. I like to think I actually live in Los Altos, but I actually live in Caltrans. So, I mean, that's the thing, because from what this sounds like, is they can put them up with proper distance between whatever that distance ends up being on San Antonio and on, whatever, across Los Altos, okay, in return for which we're going to keep them out of the neighborhoods to the extent that we can. They're going to have to do something, if they want to move into the neighborhoods a little bit. But these major sort of, I grew up in Berkeley, and directions make sense there. The hills are to the east and the bay is to the west, and I cannot keep directions straight down here. But whatever it is that goes up the hill versus, the foothill that runs along the one way and El Camino to basically parallel to it, whatever directions those go in, that's not perhaps under Los Altos control entirely. And it's really the local connectors that we have some control over, I think.
Right. So
maybe somebody who knows what I'm talking about can tell me what I'm talking about.
Yeah, let me phrase the question different for Jolie and Deborah. A facility proposed in the right-of-way, in a Caltrans right-of-way, El Camino Real, or a county right-of-way, the Foothill Expressway, but within the city of Los Altos, does that require a city wireless permit, regardless of Caltrans or the county having the encroachment permit for their right-of-way? That's, I think, the ultimate question.
I would agree.
So I'll jump in. I would believe that you would need to get both an encroachment permit from the underlying entity that owns the right-of-way, and also get a wireless permit from the city of Los Altos. If the area is entirely within another jurisdiction, be it Palo Alto or Mountain View or Los Altos Hills, then you would not have jurisdiction over that. So it's just a general permitting question for whatever types of land use permits, and whether or not you have that jurisdiction to require the permit.
Yes. So then I think the direct answer to your question would be, if it's within the city of Los Altos, it requires a wireless permit from the city. It may, in certain locations, also require an encroachment permit from either Caltrans or the county.
Okay, because that's different from what we were told a couple of years ago, but that's just what was said then. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. I just have a couple of questions. Mr. Zola, in your experience, because we have been talking about, collector streets and local streets, do the carriers have something like PG&E has like Rule 20, you know, where when you build a new commercial facility or a new house that you have to go underground? So do the carriers have an underground program versus a pole program that's preferred, especially when it comes to, you know, getting to collector streets and not having them pole hung, because a lot of the poles in our residential neighborhoods are right in our properties. Do they have some provisions for those?
Not that I know of. Now, I could be wrong on that one, and I'll defer to our attorneys and experts, but it does not appear that they do have a requirement to underground based on the size of the street or size of the facility. So that is why the guidelines are written that the preference is to get as much underground. Now, the antennas need to be above ground. The equipment can be below ground, but the antenna above ground. So, and so our standard is, you know, the design guideline is as least visually intrusive, underground wherever you can feasibly do it.
Okay, and is that something, I guess to our city attorney, is that something that we can talk about on an individual basis as these come up, if we go to collector streets, about visually having the antenna above ground but putting the equipment below ground? Or has it just come in a package?
So I think that actually Mr. Zola hit upon that, and I think that's right in the sweet spot of the design guidelines. The design guidelines have specific criteria mandating that if you're in areas where undergrounding utilities are already prevalent and it's feasible, that indeed the carriers need to move forward in that same vein of, because it would be a minimalization of the visual impacts. Although there, you know, and there could be exceptions where, you know, it might not be in an area where it can be sufficiently done because of the location of different utilities or the locations of trees, etc. I did want to also offer that, to my knowledge, the carriers have no program about undergrounding, you know, the equipment. It has been my experience that they have been very resistant to that effort. I believe you may have some carriers here this evening, and they probably would be in the best position to answer as a matter of business if they are moving in that direction. I've always been curious about that. Since it seems to be something that the communities are very anxious to have. And Mr. Zola, did you want to add anything about the design guidelines for undergrounding?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, the government, as Ms. Fox said, underground is a requirement where it's feasible, although you may find in many, even if not most cases, trying to get a box that size in the right of way, given trees, underground utilities, sidewalks, and everything else, it's a tough fit in a lot, or maybe even most cases. But in those cases where it can be underground feasibly, the requirement is that it be underground.
Great, thank you. And could you please clarify for me, you mentioned something about the alternative revised text that can we make revisions to the text?
Of course.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, this is your recommendation to make. We put ideas in front of you, a recommended ordinance, guidelines, suggestions, but it's your recommendation to make.
Understood. Great, thank you. Are there any more questions from the commission to our subject matter experts here on the city side before we move to public comment?
Yes, I have one.
Sure, go right ahead.
Commissioner Ahi mentioned areas that were non-residential and then might ultimately go residential. And you commented on a page 8 having that issue addressed. Page 8 in what? In the resolution or in some other document?
Thank you, Commissioner. I was referring to the annotated ordinance, the one that was circulated today. It's the part of the supplemental materials. That would be page 8. It should also be page 8 of the attachment to the staff report. Let me check that for us. That's attachment B. And attachment B, that can also be found at page 8. So those are the calling out of the various residential designated zones. It starts on the bottom of page 7 and goes on to page 8.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. So if there are no other questions from the commission at this time, I'm going to close this part of our session and open it up to the public comment. And right now, it would be our interim planning services director who would be calling upon the public as you raise your hand. And as we mentioned before, if you're on the phone, he will unmute you and call on you, and you have 2 minutes. You can cede the time as we talked about earlier, but if you do so, you give up your whole 2 minutes. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve Golden.
Thank you. So I just heard you say 2 minutes.
Yes, because we have several people who appear on the screen, and it looks like we'll probably have more than 10 speakers, so we better keep it at 2 minutes.
Okay. Again, if you can use a hand, any other sort of gesture. Once we make it through those, then I'll unmute other people on this meeting and just ask if anybody else has any other comments. If you can bear with me while I share screens with my clock. Give me 1 second. Can you see the clock? And I will also try to call out the current speaker and the next one, and your full name may not be on the screen, so if you can just state your name when you speak, it'll be helpful.
And if you wish, if you wouldn't mind showing your face. If not, I understand, but it would be great if you would like to show yourselves on the screen. If not, no worries.
Okay, so to get started, I see Roberta, and then after Roberta will be Jonathan Shores. So Roberta, you can unmute yourself.
I'm trying to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Zola. So I have a very big concern. I live on San Antonio Road, and I feel like, we are a neighborhood here, and we're not treated like we are a neighborhood. And most of us have lived in this area for 20 or 30 years, and we're being treated as second-class citizens because we live on, quote, a collector road. And I think that is really very, very unfair of the city, or you guys, not to acknowledge the fact that we are a neighborhood, and we are just as concerned about noise and safety as everybody else who lives in Los Altos. And I think the methodology of, saying, we're going to use collector streets is really very unfair. If indeed there are no safety issues in relationship to RF, then there's no reason why these should not be spread around evenly across town. I do not want my neighborhood industrialized. Like Marouche said, we're going to have more housing, maybe. Definitely a transitional area right now, where we're trying to add more housing and making it more residential. So I really want you to consider our neighborhood on San Antonio Road as a residential area, because that's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. So I have Jonathan Shores, and then Jonathan is Terry Couture. So Jonathan, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I just have 3 questions. Question one is, are there specific criteria for selecting the streets for the wireless communication facility? That's one question. The second one could probably truncate into one question. Is the wireless communication facility network fitted to the street grid, like, the map? Or are the streets chosen determined by the network itself? Thank you very much.
I didn't tell them I want to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and speak.
Oh.
My wife wants to say something. State your name. You still got
Hi,
it.
I'm sorry, I'm sharing a computer. Do I have some time? Okay, my name is Jane Osborne. Oh, thank you for giving me extra time.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 minutes. So you said Jane Osborne. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm a resident of Los Altos, and I live on one of the second-class streets, which is a collector street. I'd like to point out that Los Altos is predominantly residential, and all of the streets, except for some tiny little areas, are predominantly residential with rows of houses and so on. And I agree with Roberta that I'm upset that the city is differentiating and placing the residents into 2 classes of people. One class that lives on local roads, the other classes, or the second class or less privileged, live on the other streets. But also I want to say something about noise, because I think it was Commissioner Roche asked about noise. The World Health Organization has indicated that in children's learning environments, which would apply also to doing homework, that the noise level not be more than 35 decibels. And one of our current mayor measured the device across the street from her, the cell tower. It was emitting noises at 56 decibel levels. And then there's research that shows that each 5 decibels of increase, one way or the other, corresponds to either a loss or a gain in like cognitive and academic functioning. And this was reported in a large literature review reported in The Lancet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now see Terry Couture, and then after Terry will be Willem Delange. So Terry, you have 2 minutes.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Terry Couture, and I've lived in Los Altos for over 50 years. I'm speaking as a resident and not as an art commissioner. Thank you very much for your presentation today. I have very many questions and thoughts to address, but I'm going to only concentrate on one tonight. Regarding the noise guidelines, there are many of us that bought here and have lived here for many, many years for the peace and absolute quiet, especially at night. It is so peaceful at night on our street that we can hear the owls and the hawks hunting. For anybody or any government to tell us that the noise ordinances or other provisions will protect us, we find very disingenuous. Our neighbors feel that our lack of noise is priceless. Please respect that. We do pay property taxes of enormous amounts. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I now see Willem Delange, and then the next speaker after that will be Stephen Aldrich, So Willem, you have 2 minutes. Willem, are you, I see him unmuted, but he might be having some technical difficulties. Maybe we'll move on and then we'll come back. There is down at the bottom next to the microphone symbol, there's an arrow next to that. You might be able to select a different audio device. So I'd suggest looking at that. We'll move on to Stephen Aldrich and then we'll go to Carrie.
Great. Hi, thanks, Steve. Thanks, commissioners and the experts who presented this evening. Delighted to see that we're coming up with a set of criteria, the best we can do to bring better cell service to Los Altos. We've lived here for several decades as well, and whether we drive or walk from our house to downtown, there are constant degradations of signal, and in the modern age, it's really important that we, all children and our parents, all have access to high-speed internet or frankly, cell phone calls at all. And so I think the ability to cut through the morass and find ways to bring service to Los Altos that will be meeting the standards of modern society would be terrific. And second, I think presenting some more of the facts about how often noise occurs will be helpful for the residents who are concerned about it. I believe the standard cycles for cell towers are something like 1 hour per week where the coolant has to be turned on, the systems are turned on. So sharing some more of those facts will maybe make people feel more comfortable with bringing Los Altos into the modern age. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to Willem. I see we maybe lost his audio there. Willem, are you there? Okay, we'll move on to Carrie L. You have 2 minutes, Carrie.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. So appreciate the commission's time. I've been very involved in spearheading a lot of the efforts here that date back to 2019. And a couple of comments and questions. So the first is, when I saw Mr. Zola's presentation, I just don't believe that the utility pole photo was very accurate of the 13 poles that AT&T and Verizon have requested, given that all 13 they've requested are on utility poles. And a more accurate representation of that is actually on the city website of what those look like. And so I think there's a massive and serious visual blight concern. Second question I have is, what prevents the carriers from using all least preferred sites? I know that there's a 3-tier system, but what really prevents them from saying, well, in order for our network to work properly, we're just going to have to use tier 2 and tier 3s only. Third, what happens to the lawsuits by updating this ordinance? Do the 2 lawsuits from AT&T and Verizon go away? Many homes are in local collector streets, and there's a significant amount of visual blight because the utility poles are really close to the homes, whether you are on a local collector street or a small street. So the distance between the home and the fact that you can see a wireless cell tower right outside your home is irrelevant if you live on a Los Altos, a Covington, or on a small street like a Becker Way or a Patrick Way, because those utility poles are placed so close. And then my last question is, what percentage of towers will fall under tier 1, 2, and 3? I did hear the comment about, tier 3 is most unlikely, but I didn't hear what percentages of the towers would currently fall under tier 1 and 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, trying to get to my mute button. We will go back to Willem.
Yes.
Oh, there you
Can
go.
you
We can
me
hear.
now?
We can hear you. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. My question is this: is there any particular distinction between residential streets, collector, and local collector streets, like a ranking order as preference for where the tower should be placed? Because I don't live too far from Miramonte, which is a collector street, and I live on Covington, maybe about 300, 400 feet from Miramonte, and I live 300 feet from the border with Mountain View. Does that play any role in the location? Because I'm living in Los Altos, Mountain View is only 300 feet away. So, and also, my home has a side yard, and the side yard looks immediately onto the pole, the electricity pole, the PG&E. If I would envision a cell tower there, my life would be severely impacted also from the noise visually, but I'm also concerned about the radio frequency. Do we know how far the reach is of the radio frequencies and what the intensity of the energy is and the impact on brain function and other cognitive functions long term? I know by using cell phones on your ear, it can have health effects on the long term. That has been proven to exist. And I'm concerned about this in the same way. So, and also about the noise, of course. It's quiet at night here. We hear the birds at times, the owl, and so on. So we don't want to have that impacted by noise of a tower. Appreciate your time and your attention. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I think we already had Carrie. Let me just lower that hand. I don't see any other hands up or other gestures. I will unmute the callers. Give me 1 second, then we can ask if any of them have. So I've unmuted the 4 callers that I see. Anybody that had called in, would you like to make a comment at this time? You'd have 2 minutes. Please state your name first. I'm not hearing anything from any of those callers, and I don't see any more hands raised. So,
Okay.
yeah.
We can bring this back. Then there, excuse me, is there any more public comment? Just
yes, can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Now we can hear you. Who's speaking, please? I guess we have one more speaker. Would you please identify yourself?
Yeah, I saw for a moment, maybe that was Paul's iPad Pros listed on the screen. You're unmuted at this time. Do you have something to say, Paul?
Does not look like it. Okay. Well, if we have no more public comment, we can call on the carriers. Wait, yeah.
Sorry, I'm having some technical. I can't get my screen back. Hold on, sorry.
No worries. This is our going into our 3rd year of doing this. And it's
Yeah, I do see, sorry, I do see one more hand.
Okay.
I would mention, and I would defer to the city attorney, but if any of the carriers are on the call or on this meeting, they would be essentially public individuals as well, and they would be allotted 2 minutes.
Correct,
So,
and that's what I was going to call on them next. Thank you for that. I was going to call on anybody.
yeah, I don't think they'd be anything different than just our public comment period.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's correct. Thank you for bringing it up. That's exactly where I was going.
But I do see one more person now raising their hand. Catherine, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Catherine Weller, and I live adjacent to Miramonte. And thank you very much for all the information tonight and for hearing our comments. I also wanted to say, as others have said tonight, that those of us who live on collector streets are also in residential neighborhoods. And I really don't appreciate that these streets have been called out as locations that are acceptable, where neighborhoods that are on the local streets are considered to be sacred or somehow set apart from the rest of us. I've lived here for 25 years, and I don't want this blight any more than anyone else, or the noise. And I'm not sure about the health risks, but obviously people think there potentially could be some. So I'd prefer that we either try to not have this in our neighborhoods at all, or allow carriers to put them where they might, and we all share the burden throughout all of the streets in Los Altos. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, do you see a hand up for Mark's iPhone?
I do see that now. So Mark, you have 2 minutes if you'd like to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So my name is Mark Ravish. I represent AT&T Wireless and appreciate the city's work on developing proposed revisions to the ordinance. I would say that I do have some concerns about the drafts that are proposed and some of the requirements that the city is asking for in terms of justifications for the less preferred locations, since the FCC and courts have rejected a coverage gap analysis. But I think I might have heard that it's more of a technical feasibility for less preferred locations, which again, we just want to make sure, as in the ordinance, that prohibitions where we would not be able to place facilities are removed, since you know, we don't want to have anything where we're materially inhibited from providing the service. And currently, obviously, there are prohibitions that have created challenges for us to be able to provide the services that are necessary to our customers and network improvements. Also concerned with some of the application requirements in terms of needing to set appointments in order to submit applications, and a lot of this, AT&T is working on a comment letter that we will be providing to the city, and we echo a lot of the same comments that have been submitted already from Verizon by Paul Albright, and I think he was trying to talk earlier. But some of the shot clock concerns would be having appointments that would begin the clock, and we want to make sure the city has enough time to review our applications within the shot clock time frame. So those are some of the concerns that we will address in a comment letter forthcoming. Thank you.
Great, thanks for your comment. I do see Paul.
Can you hear me?
To speak, yes, sure.
My apologies. I found a thumb up and a happy face, and I could not find a place to raise my hand. My apologies.
You're clear now, that's all right.
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging our comments. And of course, thank you, Chair Doran and all the planning commissioners for all your time and effort on wireless facilities and all you do with duplexes and everything else. We do also, as Mark Rabish indicated from AT&T, have concerns about the ordinance. Most importantly, we feel the ordinance needs to cover all rights of way within Los Altos in order to comply with state and federal law. So that includes local streets beyond the 300 feet or 500 feet from a collector or arterial. That includes the CN zone, which seems to be excluded. That includes local streets in front of schools that seems to be excluded. And that in order to comply with law, it needs to include all of those streets in some fashion, and ideally within the preference system that you've identified. And that you also eliminate the prohibitions that you've put into your ordinance, including the 1,000 feet, the center 50% of a residential parcel or in front of a business. Again, these should be preferences rather than prohibitions or exclusions. And that's because we fundamentally disagree with the ability of the city to determine the need for wireless facilities. That's in the purview of the FCC. The FCC small cell order makes it very clear that coverage map-based analysis is not now something that local jurisdictions can do with respect to wireless facilities that merely have to show they're densifying their networks, improving service, or providing a new service. And fundamentally, I hear what you're saying, but you cannot look at the entire system of a wireless network and ask a wireless carrier to redesign their network. You can't dictate the technology that a wireless carrier used to provide service. And that's just beyond what is legally allowed. I'll say in the last few seconds here, these wireless facilities are not loud, and we would absolutely comply with the Los Altos noise ordinance with every facility. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Great, thank you. Yes, okay. Are there any more speakers you see on the phones, Steve, before we?
I don't see any more hands. I had unmuted the 4 phone callers, and I don't see that we have any more phone callers right now. So,
Well, this time, I think we'd like to take a 10-minute break so our internal folks can look at the questions that were asked by the public and have some time to come up with some answers so we can respond to the public. Yes, Julie, please.
You need to, just a friendly reminder, you need to close the public hearing.
Oh, thank you. So my apologies, neophyte here. I'd like to close the public hearing right now and bring it back for a 10-minute recess so our internal staff can go through the questions that the public asked and come back with answers if they have them. And then see if we have any additional information to add after that. So if I could ask everybody to stay on or take a recess for 10 minutes and, turn your camera off and mute. We'll come back at, let's see, it's 8:27. So in 10 minutes, 8:37. Thank you. session. And we left off, we had several questions that were geared toward our subject matter experts and city attorney. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Jolie, Deborah Fox, and Mr. Zola to respond to some of those questions.
Okay, I'll start then. There was a question that came up, I think, from Mr. Shores regarding the specific criteria for selecting streets. And the mapping of collectors, arterials, so on, comes from the city's adopted general plan circulation element. The reason those were selected was not as a means of trying to distinguish between residents, but it was selected because those are theoretically the busier streets in the city. They form a spine and a skeleton around which traffic moves in the city, or is intended to move in the city, and that was the selection. That was the reason for showing those. Ultimately, it's a policy question on the city's part as to how you would want to structure. There was then a question regarding whether the wireless carriers are following this same network, and that is a question really for them. They tend to look at, I believe, where do they think their need is, and how it is most efficient for them to meet a need. So they are not necessarily looking at the city's circulation maps. There were a number of questions regarding noise and the city's noise ordinance. The noise standards can be found in chapter 616, 6.16 of the municipal code. There are exterior noise standards and interior noise standards. The exterior noise standards for R1 residential zones are based on no more than 30 minutes in any hour overnight, no more than 30 minutes in any hour. May any source exceed 45 decibels from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And that is how it is written. The other thing to keep in mind is when noise is produced outdoors, there is a distance that it travels. Noise does attenuate over distance, a little bit in the short distances within a residential area, but from outdoors to indoors, a home, standard construction home with windows closed, you can expect about 15 to 20 decibel noise attenuation. And outside noise will be heard inside about 15 to 20 decibels. As homes get more energy efficient and we get more double pane windows, that noise attenuation is increasing. There was a question about ranking between collectors, local collectors, and the way that the standards are proposed is, yes, there's a ranking in terms of an arterial in front of a commercial zone is ranked and identified as a higher or a more preferred than a arterial, say on San Antonio, where there is residential. There is that distinction maintained in the proposed policies, but ultimately it's there is in the proposed policy allowing for these facilities along some of the residential streets. Your recommendation and ultimately council adoption. There was one comment, I think it was very observant, and that was I didn't write down the name, but that the pictures we showed of facilities, particularly the one that was a really well done facility with in a light pole with a facility immediately above and no exterior equipment, is not reflective of what has been proposed and what was being proposed by carriers. And that is very astute, and that has not been what was getting proposed. And that was why I made the comment several times that they are proposing them on existing PG&E utility poles. And that is one of the reasons that we are here with proposed guidelines and proposed locational standards. Had that been the predominant type, that these were really invisible facilities, new guidelines, new standards wouldn't be necessary. So that was a very good observation. Through a lot of the discussion, there was the comment about cell towers, and there's a distinction to be made. The small cell facilities, the ones that we're talking about in rights of way, are not towers. These are the antennas and equipment on utility poles, on freestanding poles, the kinds of replacement poles, replacing PG&E poles, and so on. When in the wireless technology we talk about, where they talk about towers, they're talking about the very large towers, those massive cell facilities. Those of you, and I think everybody in the community knows City Hall and the police facility, and their wireless facilities at police department, that's a tower. And there was also a question, and I'll do this last because I want to try and look at one of the graphics that I used, but I will talk about, and maybe I should go to the graphics for two questions. One, the percentage of existing small cells, whether they're in preferred or less preferred locations. And then second, how we move from, or how you would move from the first tier to the second tier and so on. So if I could, I will share my screen again. And says I am sharing my screen. Is the PowerPoint now being shown?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So let me go to this graphic. This is a map of the proposed locations, both preferred and less preferred. So what you can see are the aqua triangles and circles and the addresses. So you can see, for example, 528 Panchita Way, 440 Casita Way are macro facilities on local residential streets. Those would not be tier 1 or tier 2. Those are not neither preferred nor less preferred. That falls in the other category. 735 Distal Drive is in a permitted location today and would remain such. You can see then 197 First Street and 394 State Street, those would become less preferred locations under the proposed ordinance. 280 2nd Street is at a preferred location. 301 Fremont Avenue would become a less preferred location. 1840 Grant Road would become a less preferred location. 887 Highland Circle would not be preferred, would not be less preferred. That is in that other category. 2049 Grant Road would become a less preferred location. 2055 Grant Road would become a less preferred location. And I would also say that, let's see, both of those are macro facilities. So no, they would not be subject to the 1,000-foot separation. So I haven't really thought about percentages because the question was just asked, but I thought this would help with an understanding of what would be the happen to these facilities. And I cannot answer for what the carriers would propose in the future. The concept would be that by identifying preferred, less preferred, and then that third other locations, we would actually help steer, or the community would help steer the carriers to more preferred locations. And I would say the reason that we added provisions that would say a demonstration of feasibility is requested. So the idea is non-residential areas being the preferred location as a city statement, we would prefer not having any of these facilities in a residential area, anywhere, that is our preference. Less preferred are the where the city's main circulation system, as it's been adopted, enter the residential neighborhoods, are that less preferred. And you heard the concerns about residents on arterials, on collectors, and that, you know, they're saying they ought to be treated the same as all residential streets. But the reason for it is these are generally wider than local streets, and they are the framework of where traffic is intended to move. Those would be permitted. Small facilities would be permitted in the right-of-way only upon a demonstration that there are no feasible locations within several hundred feet, I believe 500 feet, no feasible locations that are preferred. So we only move to that tier 2, less preferred, if the carriers demonstrate we don't have a feasible location that is preferred within, I think it's 500 feet. And then essentially the replacement of the existing system, which is by exception. If none of that works, let's talk about, can facilities be moved around? You know, how needed, how feasible is it really to find an alternative that fits within the preferred and less preferred? And it's a more stringent standard. As you heard, the carriers would object to, you know, carriers are objecting to that standard. But I would say also that your city attorney and outside counsel have both reviewed what is proposed in terms of what it would take to move to that third tier. And I believe that's the questions that, those are the ones that I noted I needed to respond to. For the city attorney and Deborah Fox, any other things you'd like me to respond to that we need to respond to?
Thank you, Mr. Zola. I think you covered it all. I think there were a couple questions that were within my ambit. I think Mr. Lay raised the question of what happens to the lawsuits if the recommendation is moved forward and the city council adopts this new ordinance. I guess the accurate answer is we don't know, but we would anticipate that if we have a new ordinance, we would advise the federal court of that new ordinance and would be urging potentially the federal court that it would no longer need to make a determination as to the constitutional validity of the 2019 ordinance. I think in contrast, Verizon would say, and AT&T would say it would have absolutely no effect, and they will still be urging Judge Davila of the Northern District to rule on their pending motions and to ask the court that the court would automatically have the permits deemed approved. I know there have been some questions about the status of the litigation, so just briefly I will offer that there were 12 applications by AT&T that were denied. Those applications are now the subject of a federal lawsuit, and then Verizon had one application, and that is the subject of a federal lawsuit. Both carriers made a motion asking Judge Davila to find that the city of Los Altos' prior determination on the application was not based on substantial evidence, those motions have been pending for many months, and everyone is waiting for a determination on those motions by Judge Davila. That is just one portion of the case. And so there's a lot still to be revealed in the outstanding federal litigation. As everyone knows, the court systems were severely impacted by COVID. And so things have not moved as fast as they moved in the pre-COVID environment. And I would also, I think it was also on my list to comment, one of the speakers spoke of the long-term impacts on cognitive function, et cetera. That is within the purview of the area of health effects, which the city of Los Altos cannot regulate based on. And finally, the comments that were made by counsel for Verizon. As you heard, they are urging that the city must have and allow for the possibility of small cells within all residential areas. We strongly disagree with that premise. We have some baseline disagreements there. We have addressed the number of comments that Verizon made in its 10-page comment letter by the balloon comments on the Annotated Ordinance and the Annotated Design guidelines that were provided to you earlier today, and also, I believe, are posted on the city's website. And we do not, of course, acquiesce to the charge that we have preempted from the regulations that we have brought forward to you. We really appreciate the city entrusting this team with this important work. We've taken it very seriously. We have collaborated well with not only Mr. Zola, but Mr. Afflerbach, who is our RF expert, along with your city attorney and city manager, to bring forward what we think are some state-of-the-art provisions specifically tailored to the city of Los Altos. And we recommend them to you for the actions of sending a recommendation forward to the city council. And if I missed any questions, please let us know and we'd be happy to elaborate.
Great. Did we miss, I don't think we missed any questions. Our city attorney, Jolie, anything that you have to add?
No, just procedural issues. I don't know if you want to go through some of the proposed amendments in response to the carrier's comments. If you have some concerns about those and would like to discuss those, this would be the time. If not, then and you don't think you need any further information and you're willing to start making some motions and go forward, that's the other alternative. But I believe I heard you and maybe someone else at the beginning maybe had some comments on the comments and then our responses to those comments. So this would be the time to discuss those and maybe get some clarification or direction at this time.
Sure, commissioners, after reading the information packet sent to us today with the revision bullets, do you have any further comments that you'd like to make, revisions before we have any motions? I am not hearing any. I'm not hearing any comments on our latest letter with amendments, and I'm going to ask for a motion from the commission to move this forward to the council.
Shelley, before you do that, I am wondering if we want to rush to do that. There's a lot of material that came to us very late in the day, and I would propose that we continue this to give us a chance to go back through this now that we've had this presentation, which has made a difference to me.
Sure.
In terms of the way I've looked at it. And quite frankly, I did not have a chance to go through the material as thoroughly as I would have liked to do. And I'm not really prepared to go one way or the other today. And one of our charges was that we take our time if we need it. And I'm proposing we need some time.
That's right. No, I absolutely agree with you, and thank you for bringing that up. And so if you'd like to put that on the floor to continue this, we could entertain that and take a vote on that.
If Commissioner Steinle, if you make a motion to continue, which would be the appropriate motion.
To a date certain.
To a date certain, you read my mind, thank you. So that would be the appropriate motion.
If you speak often enough and in small words, I eventually understand.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess the question here, this is for Steve, our interim planning services manager.
Director.
No, manager. Sorry, I keep correcting you, but
that's all right.
Okay. Can we? What would be a date? You and Shelley, what would be a date certain that I could propose in the motion, or just to a date certain? And do I need to do more than just say a date certain, or do we want to say an actual date?
Steve, you sent out a list of meetings that we have coming up in the next month. So I'm going to leave it to you. We have a really jammed calendar. So can you find a date certain, and then, we don't want to keep this hanging.
Yeah, sorry, give me a second.
Can I interrupt for a second? Can I suggest it be, I know we have a jam-packed schedule, but at our next meeting, because I think all of us would like to get this resolved and sent on to council for their deliberation.
I agree. I think that if
and also, for me at least, I agree we need some time, because I too have not had a chance to really go through the late material. But it's fresh in our minds. We had a good evening today of information. I'd like to kind of do that and then be ready to move on this.
Yeah,
I would agree, and I was thinking along the same lines.
So I'm just letting you know that there have been items that have already been noticed for your Thursday, March 17th meeting. That includes you're going to be starting again at 6 o'clock for a study session, just like tonight. You will hear a project from 4350 El Camino Real, a multifamily project. And there will be discussion with regards to housing element updates and also the annual housing element progress report. But it depends on how you want to move forward with it. There may not necessarily be a lot of discussion the next meeting if it's just to help you absorb the materials and ensure that you're considering everything that's been provided in the record. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I was thinking along those lines. That it's not that we're going to spend hours discussing it. We just need to get our arms around it and make sure that we know what we're sending up to the council. Let them discuss it for hours.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if it's not March 17th,
if it's not March 17th,
it's the first Thursday in April. Is that April 3rd?
Yeah, sorry.
Let me ask, could it be March, the next meeting, or we have time to notice it, don't we?
This would not have to be noticed if you're doing date certain.
If you do a date certain, we don't have to notice. So that's why we're trying to continue it to a date certain.
I think our calendar is very busy no matter what day you pick in the next month and a half. So I would propose that we do it at the next meeting.
I'm willing to make that motion, and it sounds like I have a second behind me. So why don't we just do that, and then if anybody, wants to disagree with Susan and me, we can take it out back and settle that like gentlemen. Okay, so I'm going to move that we continue this discussion to the March 17 meeting.
And I'll second it.
Okay.
Great. All in favor, just show of hands. Or do you want to take roll? Yeah, show of hands.
Yeah, I'll do a roll call vote.
Okay. I do have a question though. Will this be included in our 6 o'clock session, or will we adjourn and come back at 7 like tonight?
It'll be part of your regular meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, give me 1 second here. I'll do a quick roll call. Commissioner Merrick?
I agree.
Commissioner Steinle,
Yes,
Commissioner Roche.
we seem to have lost him.
We lost him.
Oh. Okay. Didn't notice that. Okay. Commissioner Ahi,
Yes.
Vice Chair Menzinger,
Yes.
and Chair Duran.
Yes. Okay, so we are going to continue this item to March 17th, our regular session. Great. Thank you. Thank you to all of our participants, to the public and to the carriers for participating this evening. So let's see. We can move on now in our public hearing to item number 3, which is TM 21002, 705 Vista Grande Avenue, request for a tentative map to subdivide 26,708 square foot parcel at 705 Vista Grande Avenue into 2 lots, creating one lot at 12,166 square feet, the corner lot, and the second lot at 11,120 square foot as an interior lot along the frontage of Springer Road. A categorical exemption pursuant to 15.315 minor land division of CEQA guidelines will be considered, and Steve Golden is the planner on this project. I see we lost most everybody except people interested in this project. So Steve, would you like to
Sorry.
present the staff report?
Yeah, I was on mute, but thank you very much, Chair. I'll give a very brief presentation. The applicant is here to also provide a presentation. You already gave a description of the project, and I'm sharing my slides if you can see those. So the project is at the northeast corner of Vista Grande Avenue and North Springer Road. You can see it identified here with the marker. The dark black line is the city boundary. On the other side of that is the city of Mountain View. The general plan designation is single family medium lot. The zoning is R110. And as you mentioned, the lot size is 26,708 square feet. There's an existing single family residence on the property, and prior to recordation of the final parcel map, the existing residence would be required to be demolished, moved, or portions of the structures would have to be removed to comply with the setbacks and the other development standards of the R110 zoning district. And that condition is contained in the resolution that was attached in the agenda report. My slide's not moving forward. There it goes very slowly. As provided in the agenda report, this is the subdivision, the proposed subdivision into 2 lots. There was a correction. The dimensions did not change, but there was a typo in the area. So the lot A, which is the interior lot, would be 10,120 square feet. And lot B, which is the exterior lot or the corner lot, is 12,166 square feet. The table on the right-hand side shows all of the proposed dimensions of the proposed lots and how it matches up to the requirements. As noted there, and as in the R110 zoning district, the corner lots do require a greater width and also a greater lot size. There's also a portion along Springer Road, which is hatched here. It is shown in those hatches, and that's the 25-foot street dedication, which the city is requesting to increase the width of Springer Road from 20 feet to 45 feet, which is consistent with the subdivision ordinance. There's also a portion at the corner where the two streets intersect, where the subdivision ordinance requires a radius. There's a 25-foot radius proposed there. So the balance of the current lot that's not part of Lot A or Lot B would be dedicated to the city for street dedication. As contained in the agenda report and the resolution, in the agenda report, we called out the general plan policies, which includes the land use element, the housing element, and the infrastructure and waste disposal element, which have specific policies that pertain to residential subdivisions, and how this proposed subdivision is in conformance with those general plan policies. It complies with all the zoning development standards, again, as shown in the table there. And in addition, the California Subdivision Map Act requires several findings in order to approve a subdivision, which are further detailed in the agenda report and the resolution. And this particular subdivision proposal is in conformance with all the Subdivision Map Act findings. And with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend the City Council approval of application TM 21-0002, approving a tentative parcel map to subdivide the parcel into 2 lots, which is subject to the findings and conditions contained in the resolution. We did receive some public correspondence. I believe there was one that was included in the agenda report, and late correspondences were distributed to you directly. They were also posted onto the agenda webpage. And that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions that you might have. And again, the applicant is here to make their own presentation and answer questions as well. Thank you very much.
I see your hand up, Jolie.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm with Mr. Golden that since this is a subdivision for 2 lots, it's subject to the Housing Accountability Act.
Yeah.
And so not only would you have to make findings under the MAP Act, you'd have to make findings under the Housing Accountability Act to deny this project.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have any question for staff?
I think I have one, and it's maybe for Jolie actually more than for Steve, but Steve might be able to answer it as well. Isn't this one of these situations where we really don't have any discretion? It's like 831 Arroyo Court. It's just a subdivision. Yeah.
It is a subdivision and it is subject to the Housing Accountability Act, and it is subject to the MAP Act, where you would have to make findings that it's not consistent with the general plan, it's not suitable density. And then under the Housing Accountability Act, you would have to make what I call super findings, that, you know, it would be have a specific adverse impact on the public health or safety, and there's no feasible method to mitigate that. And so again, we would need all of that in the record, and right now we do not have that evidence in the record.
Right. Okay. So then, Shelley, I would like just to go ahead and make a motion that we recommend this to the council, but there's nothing for us really to decide, it seems to me.
Actually, I second your motion.
Okay.
I second. Let's take a vote.
Yeah, I guess I would defer to Jolie on this, but just our orders, if we want to give the applicant any opportunity, they can just defer and say no based on what you just said, but whether we should just allow them.
Well, we need to open the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take public comments and hear from the applicant, and then close the public hearing, because this is a public hearing.
Right. Let's.
I'll withdraw my motion and make it again afterwards.
I like your idea of expediency.
Yeah.
Then let's we can let's open the public hearing and ask the applicant if they'd like to present.
Sure.
Sure, thank you. Go ahead.
My screen is visible.
There you go. Yes, it is.
Honorable Commissioners, respected members of the staff, a very good evening to one and all present here. I'm Shubhendu Datta, representing Livio, which is a technology-driven general contractor in the Bay Area. We are locally situated in Los Altos and have been working to create beautiful homes for over a decade. Today we are here, hired by our property owners, Shikha and Sandesh Tiwari, the owners of 705 Vista Grande property, and we are here to present our subdivision proposal. I request Shikha to come forward and talk about their family and the purpose of the subdivision.
Hello neighbors and members of Planning Commission. I am Shikha and with me is my husband Sandesh. We would like to take a few minutes of your time to tell you about ourselves and share our subdivision proposal with you all. Sandesh and I moved to Bay Area about 15 years ago and we call it home. We are grateful for what Bay Area and its wonderful community has offered us, and we try to contribute back. We laid our roots here and are blessed with two beautiful kids, age 6 and 11, who attend public school. Being part of Los Altos community has always been our dream, and we were lucky to have found an opportunity to do exactly that last year when we found this great place. Both our kids are outdoorsy, preferring to spend their free hours playing basketball and badminton. We both love to do gardening, trying our many experiments with flora. We need a bigger space. Sandesh's brother, who lives in San Mateo, is about to start his family, and he wants to move down to be closer to us. And this gives us a beautiful opportunity to build stronger bonds. It gives us a unique opportunity to be closer to each other and settle for next several decades to come. The current home that we live in is old and too small to meet our growing family needs. We propose to subdivide this lot and construct 2 single-family homes, abiding by city guidelines and rules. We want modest abodes for both our and Sandesh's brothers' families. Los Altos has such a great culture, welcoming, respecting, and supportive neighbors. We want to be amongst you all and request you to support our proposal to subdivide the lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Shikha.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Moving ahead, a quick overview on the timeline of this project. We began working with our clients in June 2021 with the proposal of the subdivision coming in. The first submission was ready and submitted to the city in August 21. With the feedback received, we resubmitted in October 21, after which in December 2021, the project was deemed complete with conditions. We resolved the conditions to the full satisfaction of the city and resubmitted in January 22. And finally, we are here looking forward to the Planning Commission's support. Walking quickly through the subdivision details, I guess our planner Steve has done a great job in getting all the details, so I won't duplicate that. The total lot size is 26,708 square feet. We have divided it into 2 parcels. The interior lot A, as per the requirements of zoning R110, is 10,000 square feet. We have exceeded the requirement to provide 10,120 square feet. While lot B, the minimum corner lot requirement is 11,000 square feet. We have exceeded it by providing 12,166 square feet. Apart from this, our client has willingly dedicated nearly 4,422 square feet of that property to the city of Los Altos, which is today valued over $750,000. And this 25 setback is used for the city for growing the Springer Road. This is in line to the city's plan of the Complete Street Master Plan 2021, which states sustainable streets to empower people for reaching destinations comfortably, safely, and conveniently. We understand the importance of street education, which this subdivision allows the city to gain through. This not only helps in beautification of the neighborhood, but also will increase the value for all the houses. The new sidewalks, offsite improvements provide safer commute options, preservation of the street trees, reduce traffic jams, and encourage students to walk and bike to their schools. We also conducted neighborhood outreach as our part of the subdivision process and reached out to our immediate neighbors personally and handed out letters for support. And we received good feedback, and we thank all our neighbors for participating in it. This is the letter that was sent over to all our neighbors in a very personal touch, asking them to go through the plans via this QR code. We received the first responses from 715 Vista Grande, talking about the client listening to all the concerns and agreeable to meeting it. The next is from 706 Vista Grande, who are also pretty fine with the subdivision and encouraged us to plant more trees, which we definitely, as part of our further plans, proposed to do. We also received some concerns, both of which are pretty similar in nature, from 714 Vista Grande and 1255 Springer Road, which is on the other side of the city, on the Mountain View side, which we try to obviously go in detail and try to address all the concerns in this summary. Listing all the neighbors' concerns. The first one came through for the privacy request. Though this is a subdivision concern, we flew a drone and try to check if there's any concern that could be immediately addressed. In that case, for the proposed subdivision, we do not find any direct viewable point because of the dense trees already present, which we plan to preserve. Also, the second concern was impact on uniformity. I would like to state that this is a diverse neighborhood with several two-story houses around, and all the designs are as per the city guidelines that will be proposed. The neighbors also called out that this will increase the density. However, this lot subdivision is done as per the city's existing zoning regulations, and the lot sizes provided already exceed the minimums. They also have stated concern of increase in vehicles, which is can be addressed because it only sees a possible impact of adding one more house, which will see only one or two more cars, and already providing 25 feet of street dedication, which will ease much of the traffic requirements. Also, on tree removal, we are only removing trees which are at high risk of falling and disrupt services around the Vista Grande on the Springer Road side. And to explain which, we have joining us our expert arborist, David. I'll request our arborist, David, to come over the call and talk about our tree protection plan. David.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, my name is David. I work for Kilty Arbor Services. The two redwood trees that are going to be removed are under severe drought stress, and we're given a poor condition rating. Both redwood trees are right next to the high voltage utility lines, and have been pretty much all the limbs on one side of the trees have been removed. There's a pretty high risk of limb failure due to the drought stress that would interrupt the utility service. Yeah, they're just really drought stress trees. Construction would probably have a high impact on them because they're already stressed. So that led to our recommendation of removal. Yeah, as you can see in the photograph there, they're not looking too healthy. The other trees along the back side of the property are all going to be retained for screening. They're all in much better condition compared to those redwood trees. Yeah, those. And yeah, I mean, that's really about it. They're planning on planting more trees to satisfy all the neighbor concerns. And So that, yeah, the criteria for removal met by the city standards, interference with utility services and necessity to remove the tree for economic enjoyment of the property.
It's
Those are the
flagged.
two criteria met for the tree removal. That's about it.
Thanks, David, for quickly summarizing it and your expert advice on this.
And I can answer
That's
any
all from our
questions if needed.
side. Thank you all for lending a very patient here, and with all staff support, humbly request the commission to approve the subdivision. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sure. Thank you. And just for clarification, we are only voting on subdivision tonight, not citing of homes or landscaping. It is purely for the act of creating the subdivision. You'll have to be coming back to the city with your specific plans for each lot. Just wanted to clarify that. Is there any public comment on this item? If there is, could you please raise your hand, and Interim Planning Service Manager Golden will call on you. Anybody on the
hello, this is Paul Rachi.
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. How
I'd
many
like to make
how many
some
minutes?
comments
Oh,
on this project.
I'm sorry, excuse me, sir, excuse just 1 minute, just so we can clarify. I believe we have 3 minutes for public comment each.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Paul Rachi, and we reside at 1255 Springer Road, Mountain View, neighboring 705 Vista Grande Avenue. I want to thank you for letting us express our views to the redevelopment at 705 Vista Grande Avenue. We are not against any new development at this time at 705 Vista Grande Avenue. However, we have several concerns to the current plans. 7 points have already been listed on the Public Commissioner's website. I will review 5 concerns at this time. Number 1, the privacy concerns for the Lot A structure's distance to our property line. Number 2, the two two-story structures are squeezed together into this limited parcel area. This destroys the uniformity and the tranquility of the neighborhood. There is nowhere else in the immediate neighborhood area where this exists. This will change the feeling and the make of the neighborhood area. Number 3, it creates a higher density in this area of the neighborhood with two-story structures squeezed next to each other in this limited parcel area. Number 3, more vehicles will be residing in this parcel, which will create more noise and pollution in the immediate area. And finally, the plan to remove existing trees on Springer Road will cause our home to lose shading from this afternoon sunlight and also degrade the environmental and ecosystem of the area. Hopefully, our concerns will be respected to this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I see our city attorney has her hand up, please. There you go. We can't hear you quite yet.
Okay.
There you go.
I can address this now, or I can address it later, but as the chair did say, that this is just the subdivision. This is not the actual design review. So all the privacy impacts and all the setbacks and height, those will all be handled in design review. Those are not appropriate conditions for a map. And then when you see the building envelopes on the tentative map, those are just schematic building envelopes. That's not where the actual house will be. It just is a condition of a map to show that there is a buildable site. So when this comes back for the actual design review, you will see where the house is going to be proposed, the location, the setbacks, and all of that. So all of the concerns that were just raised are really for future design review, and they are not appropriate map conditions.
Thank you for that. Yes, thank you. Is there any other members of the public that wish to speak on the subdivision tentative map? I haven't seen any other hands raised.
I don't see any hands, and let me just check as far as callers. I will unmute all the callers right now. If anybody has a comment, you can. I do see another one.
Aldrich, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just, hi, Stephen Aldrich, neighbor for the family. We're right down the street, actually in one of the previously subdivided lots at 96 North Springer, and we're just happy to see the neighborhood continue to be diversified and to bring additional neighbors here. So we welcome them and their family here. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Okay. Steve, anybody else on the phone line? People.
I am trying to find the window again. Sorry, give me a sec.
No worries.
I don't see any more hands raised. I will unmute everybody again on the phone. If anybody else has a comment, now's your time to speak. I don't hear anybody.
Don't hear anybody, so let's close the public comment. Bring it back to Commissioner Steinle, who made a motion earlier.
And I will renew the motion. Do I need to restate it, or can I just renew it?
I think you should.
I'll move that we recommend the subdivision to the city council.
I seconded it before, so I'll second it again.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to take roll call, please?
Yep. Oh Lord, my screen just went blank. I have too many windows open. Okay, here we go. Commissioner Roche.
Yes, I'm back on, and I say yes.
Commissioner Ahi.
Yes.
Commissioner Steinle.
Yes.
Commissioner Merrick.
Yes.
Vice Chair Messenger.
Yes.
And Chair Doran.
Yes.
That passes 6-0.
Great. Great. Okay. I have just misplaced my agenda. I don't believe, were there any reports tonight? Any committee reports tonight? Note? No committee reports tonight. Seeing there's no committee reports and no further business, I would call for adjournment.
Let me, before you do that, Chair, let me just remind the commissioners some upcoming meetings.
Sure.
I do have a slight change based on information that was provided to me today, but earlier in the meeting, I discussed the fact that on the 17th, you will have a meeting that starts early again at 6 o'clock with another study session for a multifamily project. I sent out an email confirming April 6th, and that will be that's a Wednesday night. That will be, I should probably turn on my camera. There we go. That will be a joint meeting with the Design Review Commission, and that will be to discuss SB 9 objective standard, design standards. The council had directed the commissions to provide some additional feedback. And so that will be the first discussion. There was a proposal for also to pencil in April 20th, but I've been told that the city is not going to have any meetings on that evening because it's a religious holiday for some people. So we will have to reschedule that meeting date. And so I'll have to send out another email. I do appreciate those commissioners that are able to complete the poll. It's just the easiest way for me to organize the attendees and absences. So that's all I have. You will, I'll just tell you, it has been very busy in the department with lots of applications coming in. So this year is going to be a busy one for you.
Yeah, it's great. Go ahead,
And
Richard.
Can we have the address of the project to be discussed on the 17th?
Sure, let me.
16th, excuse me.
Is that 5350?
Yeah, there'll be a study session for 996 Lorraine Avenue. That's actually a mixed use project, 12 residential units in Loyola Corners. And there will be the 4350 El Camino Real project, which is 47 residential units.
And Steve, just as a reminder, I will have to recuse myself because that's a window, and 20 feet up that window is 4350 El Camino Real. So just when you're setting up the agenda and that sort of thing, I will have to recuse myself.
Okay, I do have, when I sent out, at least at the 6 o'clock time slot, I believe all commissioners said they were available except for Commissioner Messenger. I don't know if you're available at 7, but we would still, it looks like we would still have a quorum. Thank you. With your absence on that one project.
Yeah, I might be able to. That's on the 17th.
Yeah, I don't know if you said no for an early start time at 6, but
yeah, I might be able to make that.
That's St. Patrick's Day. We all are gonna, have to miss it.
So,
while you're doing that, I'm going to go to the ale walk or whatever it is. It was advertised in the paper today.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go have beer while you guys are talking.
Great.
So Steve, on the update for SB9, are we also doing? I thought we were also going to be doing another review of density bonus law for complete streets and the planning commission.
are you talking about like a training?
Yeah, we're going to go over SB9, but I thought we were also going to go over density bonus. But you and I can talk offline about that.
Yeah, we'll have to look at the tentative schedule and figure that out.
Yeah, so anyway,
that's all I have right now.
Okay, I did, and I don't want to be ad nauseum about this, but a couple talk about the mechanical lifts systems, and sometime in the summertime, or I did talk to a couple parking folks, and just to get some consistency of what we're looking at when these infill projects come in, about the systems and Commissioner Merrick's concerns about going in and out, and things that we don't think about because we don't use them. So sometime would like to bring that up, or even have them send a white paper in with some information, so we can understand better how they work and what the pros and cons are, and just to help us a little bit with these systems.
Could I add a comment? That I was going to call the company that was mentioned in the last street, was it First Street at the last meeting, and see if they have a local building that they could set us with up individually where we could go look at it, maybe spaced apart so that we wouldn't be there all together, but at the same time, so we didn't inconvenience. I haven't done it yet, but I would be very happy to do that. See if we could. Then we could really see what it looks like.
Yeah, and these folks offered up some sites that they've done, some infill sites that they've done with different systems, so we could see those, but we just have to space it out. They're not, they don't sell the systems, they're parking garage designers. I've worked with them before, so yeah, it's something to do, and maybe we could do that on our own. But I like to understand, yeah, you know, what the downside is to try and go in and out in one day. So appreciate you bringing that up, David. That was an eye opener for me. All right, well, here it is at 9:38, and I think we can adjourn if no one has anything else. Thank you. It was a nice long meeting. Appreciate everybody's input tonight. Due diligence. We have a lot more work to do.
I apologize for being gone. We lost power over here for, I don't know, about 15, 20 minutes. Big area down near Springer and Covington.
Oh, that's right where I live, huh?
Yep, you live over on Parma, so you were out of it too. It finally came back on, so I'm sorry about that.
You're just rural living. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Steve.